Hello, my name is Amina, and today I wanted to talk about the books that I found disappointing in 2020. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video where I talked about my 2020 favourites, so this week I'm here to talk about the ones that were the other end of the scale. So I have 5 books to talk about. So the first book that I found disappointing in 2020 was Grimm Fairy Tales by Philip Pullman. I think this was more of a problem of expectations. I was expecting, because it had Philip Pullman's name on it, to not just be the classic fairy tale stories, and that he would have given them some kind of a twist or done something really interesting and odd with them. They are just the Grimm fairy tales that you get in your kind of standard children's books, except Philip Pullman has kind of rewritten them, trying to stick to the more original versions that the Grimm brothers would have released when they first started collecting the stories. He also talks about some of the history associated with how they went about collecting them and which stories they chose to include and why, and what these stories were meant to represent for society at that time. I think if I went into reading this book expecting that, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more, but it just ended up being a bit of a disappointing reading experience because it just wasn't what I was expecting. So not a problem with the book, just a problem with me going in to reading that book. My second disappointing read of 2020 was Slade House by David Mitchell. David Mitchell wrote The Bone Clocks, which is one of my favorite books ever, and he also wrote Cloud Atlas, which there's a movie of. I love both those books. I think they're so fantastic, and his imagination is just out of this world. They're things that I would never have thought about when I read them. I just thought, whoa. So Slade House is David Mitchell's take on a haunted house story. It contains 5 short stories which are all linked by this same house, and different characters have different experiences in this house, and it's quite creepy and dark and sad, but I thought the stories got worse as they went along. The creepiest story was definitely the very first one, whereas the others just didn't quite have the same effect, and it didn't build up on that tension and that fear factor for me. I don't read a lot of horror. When I do try and read one and it doesn't scare me as much as I would have wanted, I'm just a bit disappointed by it. It's still a good book, especially if you like The Bone Clocks, because it includes some of the concepts and the ideas and the characters from that, but I just think it just was lacking somewhat for me. I think I still gave it 3 stars. It wasn't a bad book, but I just think because I love David Mitchell's other works so much, I was expecting it to be better. The third book that I found disappointing in 2020 is called My Zero Waste Life by B. Johnson. This book was just disappointing because it's obviously all about the zero waste lifestyle and trying to reduce your waste and trying to reduce how much gets put in the environment. So I just felt like the information that was given in the book is stuff that's really readily available online. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it just because I think it's, for the premise, there are lots of resources online if you're looking into a zero waste lifestyle. The fourth disappointing book of 2020, I already talked about this in my unhaul, which was one of my very first videos on the channel. So it's called Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. This is a book about a woman who dies and is reborn into the same life repeatedly. I thought Kate Atkinson's writing was really good, however I just thought the story had no plot. Initially, for the first half, I was like, okay, this is good, I'm enjoying it, things are happening, but then there wasn't any progression. We just see her live different lives. There's no point to those lives. It doesn't really matter what she does in them, because you know if she dies, she's just going to wake up in another life. She herself doesn't know this, so I guess for her, she does experience all those difficulties and those tragedies and the happy moments for herself, but she never recalls her previous lives when she comes to a new one. Sometimes she has the intuition to make a different decision, which is what creates those varieties in the experiences that she lives, but I just thought it had the potential to be so much more and just didn't do it. it just didn't do it. It just didn't do it. I'm still divided on whether I'll read another book by Kate Atkinson. I did like her writing style. It was a thick book, and I think the rest of her books are thick, and I don't know if I'm willing to invest that much time in another one of her books if it has the same outcomes. If you have read a book by her that maybe is better than Life After Life and would be a good place to start if I wanted to read something else by her, then please do give me suggestions, because I did like her writing. If there was something else that maybe had more of a plot to it, then I would be willing to read it. My final disappointing book of 2020 was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I had heard such amazing things about this book. Every review I'd ever seen was super positive. I came across it when I first started watching a lot of BookTube, and everyone would describe it as this really magical, really beautiful journey that you took with this book, and it was just a really empty book for me. Nothing really happened. The characters really lacked any depth. I guess, the descriptions of the surroundings were good. You can't have a book just based on surroundings, and it just didn't work for me. I didn't enjoy it. So in case you don't know anything about The Night Circus, it is about two young magicians who are asked to duel against each other, and the setting for this duel is in the Night Circus. And the Night Circus is a circus, but infused with all the magic that these two have to keep it running. It has some really good imagery. Like, when I think about it, I still see the imagery, but there's just no real plot, and I don't think I'd recommend it. I've heard other people say that if you want to read a circus themed book that actually has a plot to read, The Bear and the Nightingale. I haven't read that yet, but I might give that a try. I think that's by a different author, but I don't know the author's name either. I started up reading this year in 2021. I read Erin Morgenstern's other book, The Starless Sea, which I think was better in some ways than The Night Circus. It actually had more of a plot while also retaining her ability to create these really magical environments with stunning visual imagery, but it still wasn't a great reading experience for me. I don't think I'd read anything else by her going forward. I don't know if she's released any other books actually, but yes, I don't think she's an author that I would read. She's probably just not compatible with my reading style, but I know loads of people love her work, and I think if you really like atmospheric books, then you will really enjoy her books. So that was a bit more of a downer video, I think. But yeah, those are my disappointing reads of 2020. I also have some disappointing reads of 2021, and I will start talking about them probably going into the new year. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully see you again next week. Feeling where you're just like, ooh, what just happened there?